like writing poems. So poems and painting was my thing when I was at school. But then as soon as I learnt a few chords on the guitar, I wanted to write songs, so I started putting words with the music. And then we formed a band, and I'd always been in like amateur dramatics and stuff at school plays and things like that. And I liked all that side of it, sort of being on the stage, showing off, being stupid. That wasn't a problem. So having a guitar and doing that seemed like the next logical step. So once I'd been in a band and we played our first gig where people tried to kill us because we were so bad. It was like a dance. It was like everyone wanted like Boogie Woogie or something, and we came on, murdered a load of Jimi Hendrix tunes or something. It's just ridiculous. But I was addicted to it. I thought it was the most fantastic thing to be hated by all the squares and wear stupid clothes and makeup or whatever took our fancy. So that was when I thought, oh yeah, I like this. And I think that, I mean, I still love painting. I went to art school and stuff, and that's what I did. But while I was there, I formed a band, and it was the music that I knew I was gonna go into it. Painting's a more solitary experience, I mean, and brilliant for it as well. But music throws open all these doors to other people. And I think that's what maybe has the edge for me. Our first demo tape was the turning point. And as I remember rightly, it was, I think I'd just finished my degree. And we went in the studio. We only had enough money to pay for like X amount of time. We just ran out of time. We were still like playing when they're like, right, it's all over. You know, and that was the demo. It's just ridiculous. We had this sax player playing on stuff. No overdubs, we couldn't do anything twice. So we just played as quickly as possible. So it was, anyway, with that tape, I don't know what we did. We sent it off to Manchester Evening News or somebody, you know, rock critic somewhere. And they really liked it. And through them, they sort of turned on a couple of A&R men to it. And through that, it was sent to my manager, who was at the time an A&R man at Polydor. And he just had a motorbike accident. And he was out of his mind in hospital on some weird drug concoction. And someone handed him this tape, and he listened to it, and that was it. He heard something that he liked, and that was the start of the real thing. He then went to his contacts, and eventually it ended up with a record deal, not a particularly big one. I just wanted to make a record and put everything into it. The chance to sort of emulate the people you admire, I suppose, is what you're looking at. The rest of it was all a mystery to me. I didn't have an opinion as to how the industry worked or what would be the best marketing ploy or, you know, how do you break the record. But it was all such a new experience. I thought I had a kind of recording philosophy, but and it worked in certain places. But I had so much to learn. I don't remember thinking that the record was going to go out there and knock them dead. I just hoped that it got given a chance. Into my music at the time, I'd sort of fallen in love and got married, and lots of the songs are about that. So, and some of it worked out well. Falling Free I'm still really fond of, and Mystery of Love. But they were like demo sessions, and then basically the record company sort of turned around and said, well, you haven't got much money left, you better, you know, get your album finished. It's like, well, we haven't even started, kind of thing. It was all a bit of a mess. There was no great love on their part, and then they didn't really put anything behind that record. I think there was a few posters went up. I did some awful support tour, and then they dropped me. You know, there was no single, there was nothing. So it was just a bit of a mess, really. And the album hasn't got a consistency to it. There's elements of the acoustic sound and the sort of more understated thing, like the Falling Free track. But then there's other bits and bobs. Love's Old Song, which haunts me to this day. I don't know what that was all about. Things like that don't really work, well, in my opinion. People come up to me and go, hey, I love Love's Old Song, it's my favourite. And I go, oh, Jesus Christ, I don't know what to say. You know? Me and EMI were waiting in the wings. I was always told that once you've lost your record deal, that's it in the music business. What a complete lie that was, because I mean, just about everyone in the charts has been around about 8 times. It's like, you see so many old fogies. It's the history of rock and roll, that is. But But anyway, the phone rang just a couple of days. I think it was like January the 2nd or something. The first day they could drop me, they dropped me. And then the next day the phone rang, it was EMI in America, sort of saying, we had a bit of a fan there, this Brian Koppelman fella. You know, I'm going to fly over in the private jet. I want to meet Dave. I want to offer you a record deal. What do you want? You know, come and work with me. I think you could be big in America, kind of thing. So it was music to our ears, really. It was like, great. So we came over, we talked about what we wanted, and he said what he was going to do. It was all this, you know, we're going to send you out on the road, and we're going to do this, and you can play your own shows, you're going to build up a fan base. It made a lot of sense, kind of thing. It just evaporated, unfortunately. Just like weird, you know. You do interviews and someone's just reading your biog. They've never heard of you. They've just been that moment given it. And it's like you can see the whole thing just isn't working. You're just like, am I going insane? I'm putting my heart out here and it's being spurned, you know. This is painful. There was so much of that. Some of the tours, we did this one tour, they eventually allowed us to go out on the road. And what they did was they said, we're going to take the Midwest, we're going to send you in there. And if you can kind of crack the Midwest, the Midwest for God's sake, then we'll sort of take it to the whole country. It's like, why the Midwest? It was like, we had no following there whatsoever. Like in New York, maybe, you know, we had a fan base there. So they sent us out in these miserable shitholes in the Midwest. And one fantastic one was we turned up in Rock Island, you know, the hub of the nation, and there's this huge sign outside that said, tonight, barbecue spare ribs, sold out. David Gray, 9 o'clock. It was like, okay. Well, people started going insane. I mean, the bass player's eyes were bulging out of his head, and he was like locked in his room, chain smoking. It's like, things aren't happening. They're not going right, you know. So it did get depressing, and it was a real trial. And I talked to Clune, and we go like, you know, Jesus, this just isn't right. The bastards, you know, record company bastards, and you get very cynical, and it becomes us and them, which of course is bullshit, because at the end of the day, they're just people doing their job in a dysfunctional environment, and you start looking at yourself and think you've done something wrong, and then you look at everyone else and think they're doing something wrong. Or like I say, it's painful when you're putting your heart out and it just seems to be being ignored or almost ridiculed at times. I mean, I got slated in a few papers, and you just think, am I slow on the uptake here? Maybe I shouldn't be doing this. This just isn't working out. But eventually I calmed down, and I thought, yeah, well, I still feel good about the music, and I've got something to offer. And I had to open myself up, give more away, in fact, open my heart up to the whole thing again. And the moment I did that, it all started to go right. I've been restless ever since we started to get sound involved, but couldn't really find the right way to do it. But from working with Clune, where we'd set up a groove first, and because we couldn't drum in the house, we used a drum machine. So he'd program in a beat, and then I'd come up with ideas on top of it, and he'd be playing a bit of a bass line. So things already had a different feel. And we got the sampler involved, and I mean, it's all pretty basic, really. I mean, it was, but it was something we'd been moving towards slowly since before Cell, Cell, Cell. We've been experimenting with things. It just gelled on White Ladder. We didn't try and take old songs and clamp technology onto them. We came up with a load of new stuff, which was born, the two things at the same time, the beat or the sample or whatever, and then I'd come up with a tune. So it was an organic sort of process. I was just dead excited about it, to have a new sound, and also to be moving into an area where perhaps my heroes hadn't been to. It's very difficult to get away from a sort of Bob Dylan or a Van Morrison sound when you've got an acoustic guitar and a piano and a drum kit or whatever. They've done so much with that. But this was, wow, a funny noise or an odd beat or whatever. It just sounded like us. But when we recorded at home, it just sounded dead relaxed and had a character, a lo-fi kind of character to it. But I thought that sounded great. I mean, so many of the records I like are so basic, like Nebraska by Springsteen, which I think he recorded on a 4-track or something. It doesn't matter. Sound quality isn't that important. It's the performance and the spirit behind it. That's what you're drawn into a fascinating world. You're not going to go, well, hang on, no one's dusted in here. It's like you enter into a space with the music. You don't question it once you're inside. But if you hold our record up and play it next to Shania Twain, it's going to sound kind of a bit puny, because there's been about £1 million more spent on her record than on ours. Working at home in that way, it's a much more relaxed environment. You're not watching the clock tick down at £1,000 a day or whatever. You're just sitting there on a chair doing the vocal take, and the cat's next to you, and there's a cup of tea there, and the window's open, and you know the telly's on in the next room. It's a completely different vibe, and I thought that was really good. I like people would come around and just hang out, and we'd carry on recording, like Babylon and stuff. There was loads of people there, all coughing and farting or whatever. It was chaos. But that felt good. It felt more interesting, richer than the classic sort of alone in the studio with, you know, the headphones on kind of vibe. So things happen so quickly, and right there at the moment it's just being born, you can actually capture it on tape. So there's a real freshness to things like We're Not Right and Babylon, White Ladder. It was done so quickly. Like the song was born and the vocals were just done the next morning, or as soon as I had the words, I'd get the thing. So I was singing, but not knowing what I was doing. I wasn't like, oh, this is important, it's the single, or, you know, I've sung this song 100 times. I'm going to sing it this way today. I didn't know what I was feeling for it. I was reaching for it. And when you go see a gig, that's what you get at a good gig, because you can't go back and do it again. You're forcing, you're always going forward, and you get into a moment with live music. And you've got to do that in the studio. So it was perfect. Like things like Please Forgive Me are exactly that. You know, it's one of the first times I'd sung the song properly. And so that's what happened, kind of thing. So I mean, that had always been my hunch about recording. That's why I'd always try to do everything live, because I thought that was the best way of capturing it. But this was even better, because we had a backing track which was completely synced up. So you could change it afterwards. You got your performance there, and that was it. You had what you needed, and then you could tamper subtly with what was going on in the background at your leisure, which was perfect, because it's capturing those performance moments that's the most difficult thing. So it allowed me to be as raw and spontaneous as I wanted on top. I would perform songs live, which is what the ear is drawn to first, is the performance of the song, and then all the stuff behind it can be sort of, you know, like produced.